Thrilled to be welcoming in Jonathan Jones, two-time TEDx speaker, podcast host, and student athlete advocate on the Cougar Chats. Jonathan, welcome in.
Sam, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here with Cougar Nation.
You've got a more Cougar-heavy background than I've got. You're out Cougaring someone who is a Cougar. Although you don't have the shirt. Maybe we'll have to send you one.
Oh, hey, definitely open to that because that shirt looks very comfortable and green. That green is really hidden, Sam. So I'm open to it. I'm open to it.
All right, appreciate it. We'll maybe it'll go well with your Cougar background. Appreciate the school spirit today. And Jonathan, the reason I'm having you on is because you connected with Chicago State student athletes earlier this week. Green Table Talk, talking about mental health and why it matters so much for student athletes to be open. Can you, for the rest of us, sort of summarize what that was like speaking to our student athletes?
Certainly. So first and foremost, I want to just say that you all student athletes are, just top tier, top class. Because these individuals were sharing information and stats with me, even as we were going through the conversation. Because I don't like to think of it as like me speaking at anyone or to anyone. I like to think of it more so as a conversation. But some of the points that I hit on was just understanding that life throws us curveballs sometimes, and we have to learn to control the controllables, right? So our attitude is something that we can control. The effort that we put into our schoolwork and other things like that, these are things that we can control. So I really wanted to impress that upon them, understanding control what we can control, but also in addition to that, making sure that we had a clear strategy for success. Right. So what happens when I need to reach out, or what happens if I'm overwhelmed with emotion and classwork and life itself? So how can I be successful here? So one way I encourage them, I said, let's find a strategy and then take that strategy and implement it within a system ultimately to create success. So those are just a few things that I hit on, but it was a really engaging dialogue and discussion, and I felt like just from the feedback we heard, I felt like it was really impactful and really beneficial.
I hear control the controllables, and immediately I go to the current state of the world. COVID is sort of the ultimate thing that none of us can fully control.
Mm-hmm.
And for student athletes who have had sports canceled, postponed again, they're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with doing class remotely. How much has the current pandemic situation impacted your message?
Yeah, so my message was really driven on that because I shared an aspect in my life to where it was similar to where my season was somewhat taken away. So I shared just when I was injured and then I couldn't practice. So I'm watching my teammates play and I'm watching them compete. Just as I know, as you know, the Chicago State University student athletes have watched some other athletes compete. So I shared that experience and then I paralleled it, but then ultimately I brought it back to controlling the controllables because yes, we can't control being able to compete this year or next year or when things will be lifted, but we can control still getting better physically, still getting better mentally, still identifying where's the counseling center, what are resources that we can do ultimately to increase our mental performance so that when things are lifted and then the opportunity to compete present themselves once again, now we're stronger than we ever been before on a physical basis, on a mental basis, even on an emotional basis as well. So those are some things I really wanted to hit on as well because Sam, that's a great question because we've all been impacted in various different ways.
You mentioned performance,
Mm-hmm.
physical, mental, emotional. And I think in
Mm-hmm.
sports, we focus a lot on the physical performance. How many points per game? How many
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns? What did you shoot today in golf? But two and three, the mental performance and the emotional performance. Tell
Mm-hmm.
me just how vital those are.
So honestly, I would say the mental performance is the majority of the game, right? So mindset. When we talk about mindset, an individual is capable of doing anything. Without a doubt, I don't doubt it. We've seen people go to the moon, so it's possible. But if we don't ever believe that it's possible, which talks about the mental aspect, then it won't be. Henry Ford said the individual who believes that they can and the individual who believes that they can't are usually both right. So that just really hits on the importance of the mental aspect. And then emotionally, who's surrounding us in our environment on a daily basis, and what are they feeding us, or what are we feeding ourselves? We're talking social media, we're talking YouTube content, and then even TikTok, Sam. So if we think about all of these different things, sometimes we might not be as aware of how these things can truly impact our lives. Because if you're in a toxic environment, then as you get older, then you might start to incorporate some of those toxic practices in some of your current relationships because you didn't realize that they were toxic. You just thought that was the way things were supposed to go. But when we really drill down and we identify those things, that helps us tighten up on the emotional level. And then just like we are talking about before, the mindset, and then the physical comes. You know, if emotional's tight, mental's tight, then physical, it'll handle itself. But we need to definitely make sure that we do those things to do what's not seen.
I sort of feel a metaphor for food. It's feeding yourself a diet, right? We
Mm-hmm.
focus, we don't want toxins in our body, bad drugs, things that can affect us physically
Mm-hmm.
and mentally. Well, social media, who you hang out with, what you do to yourself, practicing self talk, that's all a mental diet that has to be regimented in a way.
Certainly, certainly, and I think that that's another aspect that we have to align ourselves with individuals who are first and foremost. If I align myself with Sam, is Sam gonna help me get closer to my goal, or is Sam gonna help pull me further from my goal? And it's one of the two. It's one of the two, or it might be the third one. Is Sam gonna just help me stay right here, help me plateau? So then when we think through that process and we do an audit of who we're following and who we're in relationship with, I think that really will serve us well just moving forward in our lives.
Jonathan, you alluded to your athletic background. Can you give
Mm-hmm.
everyone an idea of your history as a student athlete?
Yeah, so my history as a student athlete wasn't as glamorous. I started out being a Division III basketball manager, and then from there I ended up being a Division III junior college basketball player. We won a championship, but from that point, then I transitioned to finishing out my career at the University of Texas at Tyler, and that was a Division III program at the time. Now it's Division II, but understanding just at the same time, I had the opportunity to compete just as other individuals did as well, you know, in a collegiate sport. But there was a time where I got injured and I didn't have the mental strength. My emotional skills were not there as well. So that really ultimately dictated why towards the end of my career, bad attitude, kicking balls, kicking chairs, it was just really, really negative. But now that's why I share everything I can every time I get the opportunity so that individuals don't make those same mistakes that I did at that time.
Why did you make those mistakes?
I made those mistakes because I didn't take the time to really invest in relationships. I made those mistakes because I didn't take the time to invest in therapy initially and have somebody ultimately hold up the mirror to me and say, John, what do you see? Then I share, and then they say, well, this is what I see. So that's why it's so important to have those people in your environment and have people in your corner who will hold you accountable, and then also those individuals who will speak life to you. So I think that's one of the biggest points as well is having somebody who will speak life to you, and then that way you won't make those mistakes that I, or at least you now have the information to decide if you'll make the healthy decision or make the toxic decision.
So, Jonathan, you spoke to Cougar student athletes Monday. You speak to hundreds throughout any given year. What's your message to a student athlete who says, listen, Jonathan, I've got practice constantly, I've got competition, I've got classes, I'm dealing with my personal life, I got to find time to train, to eat. I don't have time to deal with my mental health and practice self care. What's your message to that student?
My message would be pretty simple, Sam, and it would be just this. It would be ultimately if you want to be the best individual, the best human in all of those categories that you just listed, then your mental health should be first priority because how tight your mental health is or how focused your mental health is, I would say, or cultivated, then that will help you be so much better in each of those areas. Because when you have a tightened mental health or a strong mental mindset, now this allows you to have a clear mind when you're competing on the court, have a clear mind when you're going in the classroom, have a clear mind when you're in your personal life. So these things are truly important and really pivotal to help each of us be elite in every area of our lives.
I mentioned at the top, you're a two-time TEDx speaker. Can you give us an idea of what your TED Talk message has been?
Yeah, so the first one was the power of commitment. So, and as we're talking about mental health, I would just tie those two together. Just in that talk, I talked about us doing our research, right? So if people are like, I don't have time for mental health, then I would encourage you to do some research and look at how could it affect you if you don't, right? And statistics let us know that about 46% of the US population at some point is diagnosed with mental illness in their lifetime. So I think if half of us, right, there's two of us right now, so that would mean one of the two of us potentially could be diagnosed with the mental illness. So I would say let's do our research and then let's just begin to do practices that help us around that. But ultimately, I say do our research. I say take time, and then I say find something you enjoy and then have fun, Sam. So that was the first one. The second one, I talk about just the power, the pain of an untold story. So just encouraging individuals to share their story, because I believe when we share our stories, we have the opportunity to be the prescription for someone else's pain. So those would be my two messages, and I really stay true to those now, because that's why I share my stories every time I get the opportunity, in hopes that it impacts someone, just as somebody sharing their story has impacted me as well.
Being committed to yourself, which
Mm-hmm.
was a big message in your first TED Talk, it's so important. I mean, we spend our lives trying to be committed to things, right? Student athletes are committed to their sport, committed to class, committed to your job, committed to your family, to your romantic partner, to your friends. Well, how about yourself? That's something that we often forget in our to-do list, is yourself. And I know, Jonathan, that's a huge part of your message, and it's immensely helpful. I mean, hey, even this 10-minute conversation we've had so far, it's helpful for me to prioritize myself. So thank you for that.
Certainly, Sam, because just as we've been on a plane before, or the majority of us have, and they always say, secure your mask first before you put on someone else's. So we need to make sure that we have all the air that we need to breathe, and then we can help others breathe as well. So I think it's so essential, and I think it's now necessary more than ever before.
That reminds me, I was on a plane once to New York,
Hmm.
and the pilot said that message, put your mask on. And then he said, and if you have multiple kids, first put the mask on of your favorite child, and then go down to your second favorite child. And then finally, your least favorite child will go last. I'll never forget that one. So prioritize yourself first, though, regardless. That's the message.
Definitely, definitely.
Jonathan, I appreciate you joining me, for enlightening everyone who's watching, and of course, back at the beginning of the week for helping our student athletes.
Sam, thank you so much for the opportunity. Grateful for the opportunity and excited to see how you continue to serve and support your Cougar Nation as well as growing your own platform.
Thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.